Welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about color management and looking at this process in Resolve of taking this log footage and changing it back into something that looks really natural on our display. Okay, so if you want to follow along, I'll be in the Tuesday on Earth timeline, and let's click on Tuesday on Earth Start. And let's move over to shot 8. We'll just click on the shot 8 thumbnail. And I'm going to do a couple things just so that we can see a little better. I'm going to get rid of our clips and our timeline and our media pool or gallery and get zoomed in here. A couple things to check out that we've learned so far. One is we have one node. There's nothing going on. And down here in the scopes, we can see that nothing is really very dark and nothing is really very bright. All of this signal lives between 768 and 128-ish. And generally, for something to look good on a display, the signal needs to kind of stretch from the top to the bottom of this scope for whatever display we want to show this on. A lot of the time, we're going to be working with like a normal computer monitor or a TV, which on the Parade is from 1023 to 0. So if anything's black, it really needs to be down here at 0. If anything's bright white, it needs to be up near 1023. And it's not that we necessarily have a bunch of black or white in this image, but we can certainly tell just by looking at it that it's really gray, kind of washed out, and the scopes are kind of just living in the middle. There's nothing in the upper or lower part. Those are all great clues to show us that we are working with log footage. Now, like we talked about in the last lesson, if we wanted to, we can adjust this by eye. I could grab this master wheel slider down below our lift, which is only going to affect the darkest parts of the image and only the brightness of those darkest parts. I can drag it to the left until the bottom part of my scopes kind of reaches 0. And I could do a similar thing for the gain. I could take this master wheel and grab it and pull it to the right, and that'll brighten up my image to where the brightest parts get closer to 1023. And now we have a lot of our problems fixed. If we turn this node off and on by clicking on its number, we can see before it's gray and washed out. And then after we have this, we have much better contrast. We could also go to our saturation and take that and drag that to the right. And now our colors are getting a little brighter. And this looks closer to what we can guess it looked like on the day we shot it. And this works. But again, there's a huge problem with this in that we don't really know what the camera was seeing on this day. We're kind of just guessing. We're sort of arbitrarily putting the darkest parts down at the darkest part of the signal, the brightest parts up at the brightest part of the signal, and kind of setting our saturation to what looks good. And this is an okay way to do it, but it's not the very best. Because like I said, we're kind of starting with a moving target here. This isn't necessarily how the camera actually saw this image on the day. This is sort of our starting interpretation of it. So let's take a look at what color management looks like in Resolve. First thing I'm going to do is right click here in our empty space and say reset all grades and nodes. Now we're back to our log footage. There are a bunch of different ways to do color management inside of Resolve. One of the ways would be to go to our project settings, which is down here in the lower right-hand corner. Click on this little settings cog. Then about halfway down our list, we have color management. And here we have a section for color space and transforms. By default, this is set to DaVinci RGB, and the timeline color space is set to Rec. 709 scene. And if you have these kind of settings, if you look at some log footage, this is what it's going to look like. But what we can do is actually tell Resolve what kind of camera we shot with, and then Resolve can take that information and it can apply a color transform to make this log footage look really nice and actually pretty much as close as you can get to how it actually looked on that day. So to get there, we go to our color science drop down here. Instead of DaVinci RGB, we can go to DaVinci RGB color managed. This switches some of the settings here, and for now we'll just leave this on automatic, color processing mode SDR, output color space SDR Rec. 709. Rec. 709 is the fancy word for the type of colors that something like a TV would produce. Like normal video that isn't like on an HDR TV or isn't on a projector in a movie theater is generally Rec. 709. So that looks good. Let's go down here and hit save. And now our image changes a little bit. That might have been hard to see. So let's just go back to YRGB, hit save. There's before. And here's after. So now this isn't so flat. It's still maybe a little flatter than we want, but it's doing some adjustment to the image so that we can see a little bit more accurately what this looks like. Now, how does it decide what to do to the image? Well, if we go up to our clips and show those again, and go over here to clip 8 and right click, about halfway up our menu here, we can select Input Color Space. This is the fancy menu where you tell Resolve what kind of camera you shot with and what kind of settings you had. So if you shot with a Canon, there are options for that, options for Red Dragon, Nikon, Sony, all kinds of different cameras and presets. But what we're going to look for our footage is actually Blackmagic Design Film Gen 5. The reason we're picking this is because this footage was shot on a Blackmagic Pocket 6K with the newest generation at this time of color settings, which is called Gen 5. So when I click this, the image gets a lot more poppy and everything actually ends up being, stretched from 1023 all the way down to 0, just like we would want. This is about as close as you can get to how this image actually looked in real life. And we haven't made any creative decisions so far. All we've done is tell it what camera we shot with and what settings we used. So we're going to go into more detail of exactly how this works, but that's the basic idea, is that you set your color management in your settings. Make sure you're on YRGB color managed. And then whatever footage you have, you make sure to right click and tag the input color space, whatever color space you shot with. So now we have this shot, which is untouched, but the colors are very accurate to what we actually shot that day. Let's take a look at another way that we can do color management in Resolve. We'll go back to our project settings, and this time under YRGB color managed, right here under color science, let's switch that to ACES CCT. ACES is basically the same idea as Resolve color management, but it's a little bit more generalized. ACES isn't just available in Resolve, it's available in Premiere and a whole bunch of other different applications. And some people swear by ACES, some people really like Resolve color management. It kind of just depends on your workflow. If you're working with other people who use ACES, for our workflow, this isn't going to work very well because they don't have Blackmagic Design Gen 5. They only have Gen 3, which is not going to look exactly right. But we can set this to Gen 3 and our output transform to Rec 709 and hit save, and we will get some version of color management. And this actually works great for any camera that is supported by ACES, but like I said, we don't really have the right one. So we can select Blackmagic Design Film and get kind of close. But if we're really going for accuracy, none of those are going to be quite accurate. But if you did shoot on something like Red or Sony in one of these different formats, it'll give you very similar results to Resolve color management. That said, for now, I would recommend, if you're going to use color management settings here in the project settings, setting this to DaVinci YRGB color managed, because there is a little bit wider range of support. And if you don't really need to use ACES, there's no downside to using color management inside of Resolve. The other way you can do color management is by setting it up in a specific node. So let's go back to our project settings. And this time I'm going to turn off color management and just switch to DaVinci YRGB. And let's hit save. And we get back to our gray, nasty looking footage. I'll reset all of our grades here. And now we can do a very similar thing, but we can set up our color transform instead of in our settings, we can set it up in a serial node. Alt S to make a new serial node. I'll right click this and say node label, and we'll call this color transform. And now if we go to our effects up here in the upper right, we have a list of all these different kind of effects that we can drag onto any node. If you have the studio version, you have quite a bit more effects available that actually work. But even if you have the free version, you should have something called color space transform. If you take this and drag it onto the node, this little effects badge comes up, and you should have your effect controls here in our little effects panel. Here's where you can set a bunch of nerdy settings, which we don't need to probably get into all of the details for, but what we do need to do is set these top 4 settings right here. For input color space, let's take this down, and we're going to pick the one that we shot with, which is Blackmagic Design Wide Gamut Gen 4/5. This is the color space. That's basically how many colors are allowed in this image. For input gamma, we're going to pick Blackmagic Design Film Gen 5. And this is kind of how the brightnesses of everything are mapped. So this by default will look pretty good. And this will actually look exactly the same as if you set up your color managed and set your input on your clip to be Blackmagic Film Gen 5. We also want to set our output color space, which we're going to scroll down to Rec. 709. And our output gamma was also Rec. 709. This again is specific to whatever output you want to make. So if you're making a video for YouTube, if you're delivering for broadcast, Rec. 709 is where you want to be. And now we have our corrected image that started like this and ends up like this. But the difference is we can turn this off and on to preview things and do anything that we would normally do in a node, but with our color transform applied within that node. In the next lesson, we'll take a look at my preferred workflow for color management.